The lux emitter is screaming. Every strobe is a heartbeat skipped in the reactor's chest. If the blackout takes this room, the shadows outside the blast door start looking like teeth. My eyes are burning, tracking the decay of the phosphor. The frequency is locked. The Silic-Fossils are laid out on the bench. Let the graft begin. The bunker smells like ozone and damp concrete tonight. It's a heavy, cloying scent, the kind that sticks to the back of your throat and reminds you that the air scrubbers are only 3 cycles away from a total suffocating seizure. But that's a problem for a different log, for a day when the air runs thin. Right now, the flickering light is the immediate enemy. It's a rhythmic torture, a high-frequency strobe that suggests the shelter's main reactor, a temperamental beast I call the lung, is spitting dirty current again. Raw, unrefined power is a poison to delicate Silic-Fossils. If I don't filter the scream out of the line, the lux emitters will pop, and I'll be blind in a world that thrives on sightness. Total darkness in the Oasis isn't just an inconvenience. It's an invitation for the things that crawl in the pipes to come out and play. I push back from the workbench, the rusted casters of my chair groaning against the grit-covered floor. I need to sift through the heat. That's what I call the lab, where the dead things go to wait for their second life. A mountain of shattered glass, twisted aluminum, and the green-gold glimmer of discarded furniture. My fingers, calloused and stained with carbon soot and old flux, brush against the cold, synthetic skin of a shattered data terminal I hauled back from the ruins of the North Quadrant last month. This was once a high-end relay, a piece of pre-collapse tech that probably handled more secrets in a microsecond than I heard in a lifetime. Now it's just a donut, a corpse waiting to be picked clean of its internal organs. I crack the casing with a rusted pry bar, the sound of snapping plastic echoing like a dry bone breaking in the silence of the wastes. Inside, the motherboard is a graveyard of Silic-Fossils, beautiful and tragic in their complexity. I'm looking for the heavy hitters, the static traps. In the old world, the archives call them electrolytic capacitors. To those of us surviving in the dirt, they are the shock absorbers of the soul. They hold the charge, smoothing out the jagged, serrated edges of a dying power. I see them now, standing like tiny silver silos amidst a charred landscape of burnt-out resistors and melted traces. These specific traps are rated for high voltage. I can tell by the girth of their cylinders and the way they dominate the board's real estate. They've survived the heat death of their host, but they're temperamental. If the chemical paste inside has dried to dust over the decades, they'll vent gas and scream before they help. You have to listen to them. You have to feel for the slight bulge in the metal cap, the mark of a soul that's already given up the ghost. I use a pair of snips I fashioned from a salvaged turbine blade to harvest 3 of the healthiest-looking silos. They feel heavy for their size, a good sign that the electrolyte hasn't entirely evaporated into the parched wasteland air. There's still a ghost of a charge in one. As my pliers bridge the pins, a spark jumps to my thumb. It's a sharp blue needle of pain, a reminder that these fossils still have teeth, even decades after the world ended. I don't flinch. You can't afford to flinch when you're digging in the guts of the past. If you show weakness, the machines know. Next, I need the iron. To filter out the high-frequency noise that's making my lux emitter dance like a dying insect, I need mass. I move to the pile of rusted industrial debris near the secondary ventilation shaft. There, the remains of an old washing machine motor sit, orange with thick oxidation but structurally sound. The core is what matters. Laminated iron plates, stacked and pinned together. It's an inductive gate. In the craft, we use iron to choke the life out of erratic frequencies, forcing the chaotic flow of electrons into a steady, predictable march. I begin the slow, grueling process of unwinding the copper hair from the motor's stator, my hands cramping as I strip away the copper to get to the core. The wire is brittle, the enamel coating flaking off like dead skin, but the iron core underneath is pure. It's heavy, cold, and ancient. It doesn't care about the reactor's tantrums or the world's collapse. It only cares about the weight of the magnetic field. I bring the harvest back to the flickering pool of light on my bench. I lay the 3 static traps and the iron core side by side on the scarred wooden surface. They look like a prayer for stability. The black market net doesn't provide new filters. It only provides the knowledge to forge them from the wreckage of a civilization that didn't know how to fix what it broke. My hands are shaking slightly. Lack of sleep or the reactor's vibration, I can't tell. But the Silic-Fossils are ready. The scavenge is complete. The soldering iron, I call it the brand, is humming. It's a crude tool, a ceramic heating element salvaged from a high-yield toaster, wrapped in copper braid and tipped with a sharpened bolt from a pre-war transport. It doesn't have a thermostat. It doesn't have a safety shutoff. It only has hunger. I watch the tip turn from a dull, bruised purple to a faint cherry red, the heat shimmering in the dim light of the lab. I can smell the ghost of the last repair, acrid resin from a metallic tank of lead. It's a comforting scent. It's the smell of things staying together when everything else is falling apart. I pull the donor motherboard closer, the Silic-Fossils staring up at me with their blank, black faces. I need to extract the static traps without cooking them. These little silos are fragile. If I linger too long with the brand, the electrolyte inside will boil. The internal pressure will spike, and they'll pop like a pressurized lung. I press the tip to the solder joint. The old silver blood, the solder, doesn't want to move. It's oxidized, turned into a crusty gray scab over 30 years of neglect. I have to coax it. I apply a dab of scavenged flux, a sticky amber resin I rendered down from old pine sap and industrial solvents. It bubbles and hisses, a tiny chemical war breaking out on the surface of the board. The solder liquefies, turning into a bright, mirror-like pool. I use a suction wand, a spring-loaded tube I fashioned from a bicycle pump, and click. The liquid metal is inhaled, leaving the pin of the static trap shivering and free. I repeat the process for all 6 legs of the 3 traps. One by one, they drop onto the bench with a soft, hollow clink. They're warm to the touch, almost feverish. I hold one up to the flickering blue light. No leaks, no bulging caps. These fossils are still holding on to their secrets. Stay with me, little ones. My voice a dry rasp in the quiet. You've got one more job to do before the dark takes us. I turn my attention to the iron core from the motor. It's a jagged, heavy thing, thick with layers of rust that flake off like dried blood under my fingernails. To turn this into an inductive gate, I need to wrap it in the flow strands, the copper hair I stripped from the motor's guts. This is the most grueling part of the graft. Inductance is about discipline. The magnetic field doesn't respond to chaos. It responds to the rhythm of the coil. I begin to wind the wire around the iron core, pulling it taut until the copper bites into my palms. 1 turn, 10 turns, 50 turns. My hands are cramping, the muscles in my forearms knotting into hard cords. Every wrap of the wire is a layer of defense against the reactor's scream. In the old world, they called this a choke. It's an apt name. I am literally choking the life out of the high-frequency spikes, forcing the erratic energy to spend its fury, trying to push through the magnetic wall I'm building. The iron core resists. It's stubborn, ancient matter. It fights the flow, smoothing the jagged pulse of the reactor into a steady, heavy hum. By the 100th turn, the iron is completely encased in a shimmering copper skin. It looks like a mechanical heart, ready to beat. Now comes the graft itself, the stitching of the silos to the gate. I take a scrap of charred phenolic board, a piece of synthetic skin salvaged from a burnt-out server rack. I've drilled holes in it using a hand-cranked bit, my breath coming in shallow hitches as I work. I slot the pins of the static traps into the board, arranging them in a row like silent sentinels. These traps work in parallel. They are the reservoirs. When the reactor spits too much power, they catch it. When the reactor falters and the voltage drops, they bleed their stored essence back into the line. They are the balance. I bridge the pins with short lengths of salvaged wire, my movements slow and deliberate. Watch the shadow mark, Vance, I warn myself. The negative stripe on the side of the traps is the law. If I reverse the polarity, if I let the flow enter the wrong side, the traps won't store the static. They'll ignite. A pressurized explosion of hot oil and shrapnel is a bad way to go in a locked bunker. I bring the brand back to the board. The solder flows again, pooling around the copper joins, binding the Silic-Fossils to the gate. The smoke rises in a thin blue ribbon, carrying the heavy scent of the past. I can feel the heat radiating off the joint, a localized sun in the center of my dark world. This is the surgery. This is the moment where scrap becomes a system. I'm not just fixing a light. I'm building a dam against the tide of entropy. I take the finished module, the inductive gate and its reservoir of static traps, and prepare to splice it into the bunker's main pulse vein. This is where the danger peaks. The line is live. I can't shut down the lung. If I stop the reactor, the restart sequence might fail, and I'll never see the light again. I have to perform a hot graft. I use insulated pliers, handles wrapped in thick, cracked rubber, to strip the synthetic skin from the main power line. The copper underneath is sparking, tiny blue arcs jumping to the tip of my blade. The reactor is angry tonight. It's spitting transient vault levels of discharge. I can feel the hair on my arms standing up. The air is thick and static, a heavy, invisible pressure that makes my skin crawl. One slip, one stray finger on the exposed copper, and the lethal charge stored in the line will stop my heart before I can even scream. I've seen men cooked from the inside out by smaller leaks than this. I breathe out, emptying my lungs to steady my hands. I twist the first lead of my filter onto the live wire. A bright, snapping spark leaps out, blinding me for a second, leaving a green smear on my vision. I don't pull back. I hold the connection, the heat of the arc searing the tips of my gloves. I bind it tight, wrapping the join in layers of salvaged friction tape. Then, the second one. The circuit closes. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then, the inductive gate begins to hum. It's a low, guttural vibration that I can feel in my teeth. The iron core is waking up. The static traps are filling, their silver bodies swelling slightly as they drink the reactor's poison. The flickering overhead slows. The strobe effect, that jagged, soul-tearing rhythm, begins to smooth out. The blue light in the room shifts from a frantic scream to a steady, heavy throb. The graft is holding. The Silic-Fossils are doing their duty, sacrificing their remaining life cycles to keep the darkness at bay. I wipe the sweat from my brow with a blackened sleeve, my heart finally slowing its frantic pace. The room is still dim, still filled with the smell of decay and ozone. But the light is stable. For now, the Oasis has a pulse. The hum is different now. It's no longer the jagged, frantic buzzing of a dying hornet. It's a deep, rhythmic thrum, the kind of sound that vibrates in the marrow of your bones. I slowly retract my hand from the pulse vein, my fingers still tingling with the ghost of the static charge. I look up. The overhead lux emitter, once a source of nauseating strobes and rhythmic shadows, has settled into a hard, unwavering blue. The lumen ghosts, those after images that haunt your retinas when the light isn't right, have vanished. For the first time in 3 sleep cycles, the shadows in the corners of the lab stay where they belong. They aren't dancing anymore. I pick up a rag, heavy with grease and carbon, and begin to wipe the excess flux from my hand. It's a slow, methodical movement. In the Oasis, you learn that haste is a luxury of the dead. I watch the module I've just birthed, my crude, beautiful filter block. The iron core is radiating a dull, dry heat, the copper wire I wound around it shimmering like a captive sun. The static traps are holding steady. They are the silent guardians now, drinking the reactor's instability and breathing out a smoothed, purified current. They've gone from being discarded junk in a shattered terminal to the very thing keeping my sight intact. You did well, Fossils, I murmur. I can almost feel the relief in the silicon. These components were built for a world of precision and clean rooms, and here they are, buried in a bunker beneath a poisoned desert, still doing exactly what they were designed to do. There is a dignity in them, a resilience that most of the people who inhabited the old world never possessed. We think we're the masters of the graft, but we're just the scavengers of a superior ghost. I lean back, my spine popping like a series of small explosions. The light is steady, but the cost of stability is always paid in another currency. I look over at the primary dial for the lung. The needle is vibrating on the edge of the red zone. By forcing the reactor's output through that heavy iron choke, I've increased the back pressure on the main coupling. The heat sinks are going to start screaming by morning. It's a trade-off. Sight for safety, clarity for longevity. In the craft, there are no perfect solutions, only temporary truces with entropy. To the scavengers on the net listening to this archive, don't expect your first graft to be silent. The iron will moan, the traps will hiss. That is the sound of the past resisting the present. But as long as the blue light stays solid, you're winning. You're holding the line against the great dark. But don't get comfortable. Comfort is a trap that closes just before the reactor fails. I reach for my flask of recycled water, the metal cool against my parched lips. As I drink, I hear it, a new sound. It's not the hum of the light or the groan of the reactor. It's a rhythmic metallic scratching coming from the primary ventilation shaft, the one that leads out toward the salt flats. It's too heavy for a desert rat, and too deliberate for a shifting pipe. Something out there has noticed the change in the frequency. Something is looking for the source of the steady pulse. The dark is patient, scavengers. It doesn't need to win every night. It only needs to win once. If this manual helped you keep your own shadows at bay, signal the deeper archives. There are secrets in the Silic-Fossils that the surface dwellers have forgotten. Dead codes and ghost maps waiting to be decrypted. Keep your frequencies narrow. Stay out of the light wells. Until the next graft.